Hi everyone, welcome back. It's really early morning here, which is strange because I've never filmed at this time in the morning and it makes me feel like I need to whisper so I don't wake anyone up, which is really silly because there's no one here apart from some horses over there and I think they're awake anyway. So why am I up so early on a morning? I have been up early because I've been picking flowers for a lovely DIY wedding. Which is just happening about 2 minutes down the road from here. So then the next question is, why do I have to pick my flowers so early in the morning? Now, I don't think I've ever said this before on the channel, but the reason Picked at Dawn is called Picked at Dawn, and it is called Picked at Dawn, not Picked by Dawn, which some people find a little bit confusing and want to call me Dawn quite regularly. The reason that my company's called that is because the ideal time to pick your flowers is at dawn, because it tends to be the cooler part of the day. And that's important because when picking flowers, they actually like to be picked in a cool environment, which is quite difficult in the summer months and is proving particularly difficult this summer here. It has been scorching here. I mean, by North Yorkshire standards, it's been scorching. I know there's a lot of parts of the world that are a lot hotter than this. And to add to the heat, we've had very, very little rainfall here, which has brought us to a point that today North Yorkshire is entering a hosepipe ban, and that's going to affect quite a lot of gardeners around here. Our last hosepipe ban here was 3 years ago now. At that point, I was growing the full 1.5 acres of flowers right to the top of the field. And I had some very young, new shrub planting in it and perennial plants that had yet to get their roots really deeply into the ground. And that year was difficult. I was really struggling to keep everything alive. So when I think it was mid-August, that's when the hosepipe ban came in that year, I took the decision that I didn't want to keep watering the full 1.5 acres of plants. So I took the decision to prioritise my watering on half an acre of flowers, and I left the rest to fend for themselves. And it was that year that really got into my head. If I was going to continue growing flowers, I was going to have to a lot of thought into what I was growing and how I was growing it. So I decided to assess how I was growing and what I was growing. And that was the year that the seed was sown in my head to change up how I was going to grow from now on. I felt like the onus was on me as a grower to adapt my growing to climate change and allow myself and my flowers to be less exposed to what the climate was doing. So less exposed to extreme drought, less exposed to extreme wet in winter, which I've suffered in this field. So this season is the first season where I've actually managed to put the ideas that have been milling about in my little head into practice. And I thought in this video I'd share with you guys how I've adapted my growing and the effects that it's had on the soil conditions and the effect that it's had on the way the plants have got through this year, bearing in mind we are now in a classified drought. It is quite interesting to see how things have survived, what's survived, and how these conditions have affected certain plants. And actually, it's not all doom and gloom, because from studying what's happening, I'm noticing what plants I want to take forward and grow more of. And I've took the decision to step away from growing certain varieties of plants. One of them is a still bee, which makes me sad because I absolutely love still bees. I think they're lovely, but I no longer grow still bees because they really like their feet in water. So that's a plant that I don't grow anymore. And the other one is Astrantia, which again is a little bit sad because I absolutely love Astrantias as well. But they really struggled in this field. I had a lot more Astrantia that I brought with me from the previous site, and I never managed to get it to be happy in this field whatsoever, no matter where I tried to plant it, because this soil just becomes far too dry for it in the summer. And 3 years ago, the Astrantia just decided to take it upon itself and go, no more, and it just disappeared. So I don't grow Astrantia anymore either. In this video, I'm going to show you the plants that are adapting the best to the conditions that I now grow in, how the way that I'm growing now has affected the soil conditions, meaning that I've got some absolutely, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, it's tempting fate, shh. In a certain part of this field, I've got some absolutely lush plants that you just wouldn't think are living through a drought. So I'm going to show you now the effects that the season has had on a couple of the annual varieties that are really not liking these conditions, and then we'll go and look at my really nice patch of flowers which is over there. What I've seen with flowers like Nigella is in these conditions they just run to seed so quickly, which isn't too much of a bad thing because Nigella has a very, very pretty seed pod and we'll harvest that for drying for winter arrangements. But nonetheless, I've noticed that with Nigella, it's having a lot shorter season. Another couple of flowers which I've found in the annuals in that category that have really just run to seed so quickly is Gypsophilia Covent Garden. And generally with these hardy annuals, I used to be picking for around about 3 weeks, but this ran to seed in less than a week this year. Another filler that has run to seed quite quickly this year is Sapinora. It was growing amongst that lovely canary grass. There's a little bit of a hedge, but this did last a little bit longer than the Gyp Covent Garden. But when it got incredibly hot, it really didn't like it. And you can see there, it's completely gone to seed now. Again, another quite pretty seed pod though. And by comparison, in the same planted area is this Achillea the Pearl. This little patch of plants here was sown last autumn and planted out in April, and this has now been in flower for 3 weeks, and it just isn't running to seed. The heat isn't affecting it as much as it has the Gyp and the Sapinora. So Achillea the Pearl, I would say, is a really strong white filler plant that can deal well with the heat. The perennial in this bed here, which has fared incredibly well and is incredibly strong, is Eryngium. This is Eryngia Blue Glitter. So this is a very young plant, and sometimes young plants in perennials can suffer when there's a period of drought. But these Eryngiums have fared so well and are looking incredibly healthy there. Another plant that you'll know if you watch the last video I have a lot of time for is Linonium or sea lavender. It's a brilliant perennial filler flower for creating bouquets and arrangement, and it is highly adapted to drought situations. Another perennial that blooms reliable for me even in the hottest of summers is Nepeta. I grow Six Hills Giants. I cut it back every May and it blooms again at the end of summer. And if you're looking to add some annuals to your sunny, dry borders, then you can't go wrong with snapdragons. They do incredibly well for me every year. And, of course, zinnias. They love it hot and dry. And I've just been busy planting out our last batch. So this bed behind me here is a soft pastels bed. And you can see we've got the calendula, which is coming to an end there. The campanulas now are finished, and there was an absolute load of poppies in this front area here which have finished now and gone to seed, so I've taken them out, and I am actually still planting and establishing new planting in this area here. So you'll see there some very young plants, very closely planted. So we've got Melope and we've got scabious, asters and bunny-tails grasses in there. Now establishing new planting in drought and extreme heat isn't always ideal, but I've got a few tips for you, and this is how I planted my scabious. If your ground's incredibly dry and you're still trying to establish plants for this summer, it's really important that before you plant, you water your planting hole and the plant that's going in it. Because if you put a wet plant into dry soil, the dry soil will act as a sponge and it'll remove all the moisture from around the roots. So here we are. This is my jewel bed of flowers. Everything that I've planted in here is going to flower in hot tones, like that orange Potomac snapdragon, and sort of jewel red tone, like these Cosmos rubens here that are just starting to flower, and the black ball cornflowers there, and the orange straw flower, and the ruby eclipse sunflowers there. Now this here is what I'm calling not only the dual bed, but the jungle planting style. You'll see at the front here, I've got some younger planting. And this is where the early spring flowers were that have now finished and we've taken out, and we've replaced them with some zinnias and some amaranthus and the scabious that's down there, which was planted a couple of weeks ago. So this gives you an indication of how close I'm actually planting in this bed. So I am planting my plants about 7 to 10 centimetres apart, and these are scabious and that's cosmos. Now the sun is just rising up there, and this is quite a good time so I can show you how it's affecting the soil beneath the surface here. These plants, because they're very close, are providing shade for this scabious here. So I've got down into the bed now because it's easier for me to explain the reason that I'm planting like this. So as the sun's rising over there in the east and goes over to the west there, so the different heights of plants at various growth stages and the closeness of the planting is creating shade for the newer plants that I put underneath. Now shade is brilliant because it keeps your soil cooler. So the Physocarpus hedge there that's in the background is doing a great job as well. So around this bed I've actually got unanimous spindleberries as well, but they're yet to establish. But when they do establish, my hope is that that will form a canopy so that the ground beneath these shrub plantings is going to be shaded and a little bit less susceptible to the drying sun. What that'll also do is stop the ground being eroded by drying winds that come down from the west as well. So just all in all, protecting this bed of flowers that we've got here. Now what this means is if I dig a bit of my soil, bring it over to the camera so you can see here, that is the centre of this bed. Now this bed here was improved with quite a lot of manure over the winter, and you can see there how amazing that soil is right from the middle. I'm fully happy that the plants that are growing in this have enough moisture still. And then we come to this frothy pastels bed, which is currently covered in a lot of ammy. And I'm going to put my trowel in here into the centre of this bed. And that is my soil in the centre of this bed. It's still obviously got moisture in it because I was able to get a trowel's worth out. And in previous years, this would have been absolutely solid and I wouldn't have been able to get trowel in at all. So I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. And a lot of that I put down to the shade that has been created through the middle of this bed, with the ammy and the achillea doing perfectly to shade the ground beneath it. Now seedlings and really young plants are very susceptible to problems in these temperatures and drying out. So if, like me, you've been sowing biennials and perennials in your polytunnels and greenhouses and they're in seed trays, I'd recommend that you put the seed trays somewhere shaded, or if you can put them beneath the tables or rig up some shade netting on top of the seedlings, that'll go some way to protecting them. And also put your seed trays onto a layer of cardboard so that when you're watering the seed trays, you're damping down the cardboard beneath them, and that moisture will keep the air temperature lower around the roots of the seedlings. In my polytunnel, I've also got old carpet, which I wet down every month, and that helps to reduce the temperature a little bit in the polytunnels as well. So there we go. They're the many ways that I'm trying to keep growing through the drought and the extreme heat at the minute. I hope you're managing to keep your plants and seedlings happy, and it'd be lovely if we could all share some hints and tips and variety names that are getting us through these hot, dry conditions. So drop some ideas and some varieties in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you next time. Bye!